Hey, welcome back to the 7-Figure Music School podcast. I'm Daniel. This is Nate. And in the 7-Figure Music School podcast, we help you run a better school. One that is based in systems and enjoyment of your job. One where you're not working 70 hours a week. And it's been a while, Nate, since we've had a themed month.
Have we ever had a themed month?
Oh, no, of course we have. We did a whole month of marketing one time. We did a whole month of how to do summer camp correctly.
Yes.
We did some themed episodes in 1 month around systems. That's way back at episode 46. Mm-hmm. So that one kicked it off. It was the first time that we did a live episode together, episode 46. Anyway, Nate, I had... In the BK, yes.
Yeah, right in this very room. I remember that.
Yeah.
A little different. Okay, good. Themed month.
So, Nate, we have talked since the very first few episodes of this podcast that there are 4 buckets of business. But in talking about the 4 buckets of business, we've never actually made an episode about the 4th bucket. We've referenced it many times.
Yeah. Okay.
But we have not actually talked about the 4th bucket of business. The reason why I want to talk about the 4th bucket of business this month is several-fold. First off, we got several emails from different listeners over the last 3 to 6 months where they were asking questions about implementing new things in the school, implementing new curriculum. We're going to be doing that. Mm-hmm. Also, we just did a 5 for 5 last week with Jessica Hansen, and she actually embodies many of the spirit, or embodies many of the qualities and the spirit of the 4th bucket. And so we're going to have her back on, actually even outside of the month of March. She's actually coming back on at the very beginning of April to talk about how she implemented that new business bucket, which is the 4th bucket of business. And then right now, this time of year is actually the time of year where school owners are most thinking about adding new programs to their school.
Right.
They're thinking about what they're going to implement in the fall. They're preparing for that. They're training for that. And so I think now is a good time to think about implementing new curriculum, implementing new programs, implementing new things that will make your school bigger, better, happier, less stressful. So with that in mind, I know it's already the second week of March, but let's kick off a month of talking about the buckets of business, the 4th bucket of business, Nate, by talking about the new business bucket, which is honestly a concept that I'd heard from you. And so since you're the resident expert here, I'm going to just start out with a question. What is the new business bucket?
Well, beyond just being bucket number 4, a quick review. The 4 buckets are: bucket number 1 is marketing and sales. Bucket number 2 is delivery on promise. That's actually just making sure you follow through on the product. Bucket number 3, sometimes call like back office, but we call it money and people. And then bucket number 4 is new business. So sort of new business opportunities. And I would love to take credit for these 4 buckets, but in fact, it was taught to me by one of my mentors years ago as a simple way to view our entire business. And bucket number 4, simply defined, is any sort of new revenue channel that you may want to explore. Maybe it's something you've dabbled in, i.e. here's a classic example of a new business bucket item. You want to have, songwriting birthday parties at your school. You've maybe had a parent ask about a birthday party, or you've had a friend of a friend who hired you to have their birthday party at your school, but that's about it. You've dabbled in this opportunity and you've thought, man, maybe I should do that. So a new business bucket is reserved specifically for new revenue channels that you want to explore and that you might consider investing in to become part of your core sort of product suite, the things that you are going to support in your school. So that's simply defined what a new business bucket is reserved for.
So I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
In the first 3 buckets, we're referring to things that are tangible, such as marketing systems, salespeople, actual back office staff and the money and people, teachers, product. The 4th bucket is defined by something fundamentally that doesn't exist. So Why is it its own bucket? Like, why designate it? Because if it is something new that would be in the other buckets, why did your mentor, or why do you designate it as its own thing?
Okay, great question. It is really an idea bucket, but it's an idea bucket that has a very specific intention and sort of set of criteria that we use within that bucket, or a system that we use within that bucket to process an idea. So the reason why it's its own bucket is literally 25%. It's the fourth bucket.
Yeah.
And what it was taught to me as needing its own bucket for a host of reasons. Number one, when you have a new idea, and can we just take birthday parties as our that's going to be
Sure.
our sample idea,
or date night or something like that, because we did an episode on date night,
or yeah, and it can be something like that. It doesn't have to be just a once in a while. It could literally be you're going to add a rock band program for teens, right? That could be definitely a new bucket idea. Or we hear all the time, like you said, are themed, like you've never really succeeded at camp, and now you really do want to have a camp. So camp is something. The reason why it needs its own bucket is because an idea is only an idea, but as an entrepreneur, an idea can take on all this weight. Because as entrepreneurs, one of the curses of the entrepreneur is that we're always looking for new ideas to develop. We're constantly thinking to ourselves, maybe because Brooklyn Music Factory is so successful with selling hats and t-shirts and mugs and blah, 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 that we should open up a whole store at our school. Maybe that's the next big thing for us. And so instead of just observing it as like, that's a cool idea, let me throw that in a parking lot, we take that idea and we start taking up real estate in our mind. Valuable real estate gets taken up in our mind, and all of a sudden we're distracted from what we actually do at our school currently to generate revenue, pay for our teachers, make a profit, be happy, and all these things. So the first reason why it has its own bucket is because we are a unique bunch of people. We are a bunch of people that are always looking for something to develop. And we have to be very careful about that. So new ideas are coming to us all the time. If you're, listening to this and you just walked in to have lunch somewhere, an hour ago, you likely took stock of 2 or 3 things they were doing at the restaurant, even though you don't even run a restaurant. You run a music school and you're like, that's a cool idea. I wonder if we could implement that in my music school.
We need a hostess right when someone comes in the door.
Right, totally. So I'm being a little bit dramatic here, but you know what I'm talking about, because that's exactly the way my mind works.
The first time I went to Disney World as an adult, because I hadn't been since I was 12, and then I went I was like 35, and I was taking my 5-year-old to Disney World for the first time, and I was just looking around thinking, oh my word, this and this. Like, I was thinking of the business implications. Completely agree with you.
So, okay, so why is that so? Where do we need to go from there? Well, bucket numbers 1, 2, and 3 all work in concert to be able to deliver on whatever it is that you're selling. In our case, we're selling, group piano classes or songwriting group classes or private guitar lessons or whatever it is, right? And so when we want to add a new idea or a new product to our suite of products, so let's say you currently teach private piano lessons and you'd like to move into group piano. That's a classic new business bucket item, right? And so that requires building a marketing and sales funnel to be able to attract parents that are only convinced that a one-on-one lesson is what will work. That requires training teachers who might have no idea how to manage classrooms, have no idea how to manage 8 pianos at once when they're accustomed to one-on-one lessons, right? That's the delivery on promise bucket. That requires a whole new curriculum that will, retain those students for however many years you anticipate retaining students. That requires picking the right program that will serve the age range that's of interest to you, right? In addition, that will require, new money and operations systems that need to be built. Maybe you pay differently for group classes. Maybe you hire differently for teachers to teach your group classes. Maybe your facility doesn't even have the appropriate square footage yet. So you need to find a new location to put these groups, or you need to add a room, or you need to build a wall. So obviously, maybe you need to buy all this new equipment and you need to figure out how to borrow $10,000 and manage that debt. That's a whole money issue, right? There's all these things that go into that one idea. And so the reason why it has its own bucket is because we have to be so mindful that anything that moves, dig this visual, Daniel, anything that moves from an idea in bucket number 4, having been assessed, etc., into the first 3 buckets, that is not a small choice. That is a large choice that has to go through a whole process before it moves into that, right? So that's why it has its own bucket. That's why it was taught to me. And when it was taught to me, Daniel, it was like, this has its own bucket. You're not going to spend a ton of time there, but you need to know it's there because it is so important that you say no to 95% of the opportunities and yes to 5%. And so you have to have a parking lot where you can put all those ideas and then go through the processes of assessing that idea in its own unique way before it moves into buckets number 1, 2, and 3. So hope that's clear, but that's why it was taught to me as needing 25% of your real estate.
So Nate, I think that gets us to, I think maybe the penultimate question of the episode, which is, how do you assess an idea? How do you know if something is worth pursuing or should be cast aside? James Altucher talks about the idea of coming up with 10 ideas a day so that you end up coming up with over 3,000 ideas every year. And then he says you really should only execute on a few of them. But you should constantly be thinking of new ideas.
Yes.
And so how do you stay focused as an owner and know what to pursue?
Love it. I do it in my mind systematically, bucket by bucket by bucket. So I'm going to actually pivot over to summer camps because I mentioned those. And I'm in the process right now with talking to a bunch of schools about adding a songwriting camp to their program. And one of the things we do is we go through an assessment checklist. And so anyone listening can just take any of your ideas and write these tactics down, right? And put it through it. The first is I say, okay, how many people are on your list? Let's look at just the marketing and sales bucket first. How many people on your current student list? They might say, like, we have 100 families. Great. Okay, how many people are on your inquiry list? Well, we got another 380 families on that list. Cool. What I want you to do is I want you to start by writing a soft survey email to your current families and anyone inquiring and say, hey, I'm thinking about offering a songwriting camp this summer. Is that something that would interest you? That's it. That's the entire email. It's just a lightning quick survey. It's so simple that we forget to do it. Right? We forget to actually ask.
All the time. I deal with people who have a good idea, but then the execution is like, well, I sent a couple emails out about it and no one bit. I guess no one wants a summer camp. I guess no one wants this or wants that. And it's just like, oh, it takes a lot more than that. Part of the reason why you can only execute on a few ideas is if you actually do execute on them, it's going to take a lot more work than you probably anticipate. So you've got to pick your shots very, very well, which is why you want to assess it correctly.
Yes. So step number 1 for me would be assessing via a soft survey of families. And really, let's say you send out 100 emails to your current families and you hear back from 10 to 20 of them. That's a pretty good hit rate, if you get 20% of families saying that sounds interesting, then as far as launching a summer camp, you're already in a good position, right? Okay. Let me mention one other example, because this was someone we, not in the Founders Forum, but we coached a few years back. And this is this question comes up often, which is, I'm in a current location and I want to move to a new location that's bigger and better, but it's 5 miles away. Should I do it? That's a classic new business bucket, right? That is a classic new business bucket.
And a pretty big question too.
And a pretty big question. And I remember when we were working with this one client, the first thing we had her do was to reach out to all of her current families and saying, I may have an opportunity to move to this new location at some point in the future. Would this be close enough for you to commute? Or would this be too far for you? Just an open-ended question, just wondering, and all you need to do is hear from enough families that say like, oh, no problem. We love you. We'd drive an extra 5 miles, whatever it is. So that's another example of a soft survey on families. You're not committing to anything. You're just trying to gauge that you have enough percentage of interest from them that you would consider continuing to do the next research, which gets us to the sales funnel. So the sales funnel, of course, is all about understanding the product and being able to be convincing around the features, the benefits of the product, and then wondering whether or not you have team that can actually communicate that. It sounds sort of simple, but in fact, oftentimes people are like, I just want to do this new idea because it'll make me more money. Well, you can be guaranteed you will suck at selling it.
Wait. So can I ask a clarification question there? Are you saying that if the sole purpose is an economic one, that it won't go well? Is that kind of what you're saying there?
Well, what I'm saying is, if your initial motivation is purely economical, then it means you can have an economical motive. You can have a money motivation, but then you need to make sure that you are partnering with a program that has figured out a number of these things for you, i.e., license a program from someone who says, okay, let me clearly show you what the features and benefits of this are if you were to do it this way. But a money motivation, it's like sales fundamentally are about showing someone that you hear what their issue is and you have a way to help solve that will be of great benefit to them. And so if you are coming at this new business idea purely from a money mind, then you're gonna have to work much harder than the next school who's not.
And I'll flesh that out to say that it's structural. It's because of how you approached it. It's because if you were opportunity minded, or money minded is one way of being opportunity minded, you didn't start with the most important person.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, you started with your own wants and needs. Yeah, totally. Well put. Okay, I want to move over to the delivery on promise bucket and an assessment for a minute, because I think we're going to talk about this in a future episode here around the new business bucket in the month of March, in our March Madness month, which is that obviously if you're taking on something like a summer camp, there goes along with it some sort of curriculum. And obviously whenever you adopt a curriculum that goes along with the summer camp, there comes along with that teacher training, in-class experience. You have to ensure that you're going to be able to get that first summer where the bar is high enough that enough families come in and experience your summer camp with those teachers who are well-trained on this summer camp curriculum, that they will then spread the word about your camp. Because any new business idea is going to really need some referral legs to get it growing, right? You're not gonna just simply buy leads through your Google ads, put them into a B- program, churn through students, and continue to run that funnel. If you're going to grow something that was a new business idea into a long-term, profitable, sustainable product as part of your suite, then you need to know that you have some sort of plan around how you're going to train your teachers and measure success within the classroom. So that's the second part of the assessment, i.e., if you have a new business idea that's an area of expertise. I'm going to give you a concrete example. My business partner, Pira, had done hundreds of songwriting birthday parties in her previous career before we partnered. So when we launched our birthday party program, she's like, the one thing I can promise you is they will always have a great time, and I have a perfect 2-hour curriculum. And you're like, I was like, hell yeah. Then let me work on the marketing and sales piece. You just described the whole thing to me, Pira.
Sure.
And I will work on bucket number 1, and then I will work on the money piece, and I will work on the operations piece, the people and the money piece. You focus on the delivery on promise, which she did. And she even did things like when we were launching birthdays, long before we sold a bunch of them, she would bring in like her daughter and all of her friends for a free party. And she would set up photo shoots, and she would test curriculum on all these kids to refine the birthday party offering to ensure that it was meeting her standards of what we were supposed to do at Brooklyn Music Factory. And so, again, that gets to us to our bucket number 2 assessment piece. Remember, Daniel, we're still wondering whether this is a good idea, right? We're not putting it on the website and saying, go, let's see whether people are interested. We're in bucket number 4 where we're assessing our idea. And so it's so important as a listener that we remember this, that we're investing think time, research time, critical thinking right now, a little bit of development time before we decide it's a go, which is a radically different approach than so many people take, which is like, wouldn't this be awesome? I heard they do it. Let's do it.
I just enjoy how you had mentioned that Pira was very experienced at delivering this product well. You talked about how this entire concept that this episode is based on, you got from one of your business mentors. One of my business mentors had this quote, and he said, and I've been saying this for 10 years when I first heard him say it, be smart enough to know when you're getting lucky. A corollary of that will be another quote I've said in this podcast before. Warren Buffett has a saying that I feel is spiritually kind of similar. When it's raining gold, reach for a bucket, not a thimble. Sometimes the assessment is literally like, oh my word, this opportunity is just dropping into my lap. And the assessment piece is pretty quick because it's just so obvious that you need to move forward on it. Don't overthink it when that's the case.
Yeah.
I met the right person at maybe a neutral time and have completely upset a plan that I had simply because it's like, ooh, there's an opportunity here with this person. And I don't know, this felt like the right time to put that idea in there. But I wouldn't have said it if you hadn't said what you did.
You had another quote that you shared, and I thought it was a Warren Buffett quote. So actually, I did a quick peek, but I don't think it is. But you said something. I'm going to totally paraphrase so you can fix it.
Okay.
Fix me on this quote.
Oh no.
Which is write down 25 of your best ideas, 25 goals you want to achieve this life, and then get rid of 20 of them. And the remaining 5, you can probably do 5.
I think it's 3, actually.
It's 3.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm pretty sure that was Warren Buffett.
Oh, was it? Okay, I was wrong correctly, but I sort of butchered. Sorry, Warren, I butchered your quote.
Well, maybe. I just remember it because in the book that I read that in, they had like a diagram and it showed like how you do the exercise or something. So it couldn't have been Warren Buffett writing that book because he hasn't, but I think it was someone maybe describing something that he'd said in book form.
Got it.
Or something like that. But I could be way, way off. Now I want to look it up.
Well, one of our listeners, find the correct quote and write us, will you, please? I want to go to the last part of assessment if I can. And I want to go through the money and people bucket number 3 assessment. So, we're right. We just wrapped up actually a financial fluency month in the Founders Forum. And one of the things that we share in that is this idea of a simple profitability calculator, or basically a new product forecasting calculator, so that you can quickly and easily assess what the opportunity is financially, right? There is no question that one of your steps needs to be, we'll go back to our camp example, because, when we work with schools, we have this super simple camp budget. It's literally called the super simple camp budget. And I think I've showed that to you before, Daniel, but it's it's meant to quickly and easily assess whether, you have a 10-person camp versus a 40-person camp. What is the contribution margin going to be? In other words, what kind of money is going to be left over after you cover all the costs that you're going to be able to put back into the business or into your pocket if you needed to do that. And so you absolutely, as part of your assessment, need to do a quick market research on pricing. Like, what are the other 5 schools in your community that are running day-long camps? What are they pricing out at? Right? You need to do that pricing and figure out what your cost is going to be, what your price is. And then you need to come up with a profitability calculator that allows you to process that, because you want to see, like, well, what are you going to invest in teachers? What's your cost of labor going to be? Are there any other operational costs that go along with running this camp or with running that birthday party? We have I have a calculator that's just for birthday parties. Same idea, right? So that's the money piece. Doesn't have to be complicated, but you do have to take those steps. Because, by the way, if you're thinking new business idea, I want to see a return on it right now, like within 3 months, I want to see a return, you're not thinking realistically. Anytime I take a new business idea and decide I want to invest in it at Brooklyn Music Factory, I think along a 3-year growth path. So, of course, I want to see, can I break even or better, or even see really nice returns in the first year? Of course, I want that. But I need to have a very clear assessment that gives me a 3-year growth path, because it can take some time to get those referrals from happy customers that then feed bucket number 1 and improve your efficiency around the marketing and sales bucket, et cetera. Like, that's a virtuous cycle.
If someone took nothing else than what you just said from this episode, they would be way ahead of most people. Nobody thinks this way. And
well, I hope they will now.
and to apply it to something you said at the very beginning of the episode, obviously you're talking about a product there. But if we're talking about the new business bucket as also making operational changes, creating new systems, new marketing funnels, things of that nature, and we have that longer time period in mind, we will start acting like actual adults in business if we do that, instead of children that want what they want right now. The biggest problem that I encounter as a coach or a consultant is that people come on a call with me and they want to know that what I'm going to teach them or work with them on in their school is going to, will this happen in like the next 3 months?
Yes, totally.
Sometimes it does. I had a client who's running a premium studio on the East Coast, who came to me in the summer of 23, and just in their own studio, they had big aspirations for eventually expanding this. They're making about $50K a year take home after expenses. 6 months later, we're making $130K a year annualized. It works that way sometimes. There are and they were in a competitive market. I've talked to other people in other competitive markets where it took them a little bit longer. The growth path was a little bit slower. And even one guy in particular, I'm thinking about in the northern suburbs, in the near north side of Chicago, where he had a very specific product. He was very choosy about the clients he wanted. I told him, look, you're already working with tough competitive metrics here. But the fact that you're being this choosy about who you work with, and then this choice, and this choice, and this choice, this is not going to be easy for you. And he came back 4 months later and he was feeling a little bit discouraged. I was like, you got to keep persisting. I told you it was going to be hard. And then he broke through. And like a year later, he was making triple what he'd been making when he met me. And so he was approaching 6 figures at the end of a year. And You have to have that patience. You cannot, everybody, yeah, never mind. I could go on and on.
Well, this is why that fourth bucket exists, is because if you need a very systematic way to assess every new idea you have, an opportunity you have, if you're not going to go through the process of assessing it, then just put the idea in the parking lot. There's nothing wrong with that. Nobody's judging you for having an awesome idea that just lives in a parking lot for a year, right?
I've got a whole folder in my Evernote called Great Ideas That I Will Never Do. Because it's psychologically satisfying to take it off my mental plate. Like, I let myself off the hook by saying, look, I acknowledge this is an awesome thing. I've got one life, and I've got a fairly well-defined pathway planned out for myself in the next couple of years. Some of these ideas, as good as they are, would just distract me from my purpose.
Yes. I want to make one more detailed comment around bucket number 3, assessment. So we talked money briefly. Now you're assessing people. Think of it this way. Think of your hiring funnel. Are you going to need to design a new job description? Are you going to need to design a new Indeed ad? Are you going to need to design a new way to interview these people and assess them and demo them to make sure that you have the right talent to follow through on this new idea? Or do you have people already within the school that you think would crush on this? In which case, all you need to do is reach out to them, book a 15-minute meeting with them and be like, I got this idea. Let's just talk through what it could look and feel like for you. And so you can gauge engagement. That's difficult to process, but it works. You can gauge their engagement in your new idea and whether or not they're going to be the right fit for delivering on a promise. How deep is their interest in this new idea? Or are you looking at a new hiring funnel, and do you have the patience and willingness to go through attracting enough applicants to be able to hire to deliver on that new idea? So that's that last assessment piece. And we'll literally let's go back to our birthday party idea. We'll, of course, think internally who would be great at it, but we'll also write that birthday party job description. Like who are we going to hire for it? We're gonna go through that whole process of figuring out exactly how we're going to vet and hire to this new idea or this new product. So that's it. It's not a complicated process, but it is a checklist. So hopefully if you were taking notes, you'll take that new idea you have and you'll be like, I'm just going to go ahead and try to assess it the way Nate and Daniel just outlined it. Let's just see what I come up with after going through that process. Here's the deal, Daniel. If we don't go through that assessment checklist with our new idea, like we said before, it's totally fine to put it in your Evernote. You have ideas you'll never do. It's totally fine to put it in a parking lot, ideas you might do in 2 years, ideas you're going to revisit. But if instead you go that old school, you go that old route, that old version, that younger, less mature business version of yourself, and you just say, let's just try it. Come on, let's just do it. I don't have time to assess the marketing. I don't have time to come up with a pricing graph on this. I don't have time to work on a job description or a profitability calculator. If you don't do that, you're forgetting the opportunity cost, which is if you go after that and it turns out it sucks your energy for the next 6 months trying to get this thing off the ground and you're banging your head against the wall, what are you actually doing? You're actually putting in jeopardy the thing that you were already selling and trying to deliver on. You're actually putting in jeopardy all of the other systems that still needed to be refined around the product suite you already had. If you were a private piano teacher and you quickly were like, I'm going to add this other thing, birthday parties, and then your real estate in your mind gets taken up thinking all the time around birthday parties, then guess who suffers? Your core customer base.